welcome back to the channel for another video. Once again, if you are watching this during this time, I am not here right now. I'm at the beach and I can't do any videos to cover any new Season 11 news that may be out. So basically, I wanted to take today's video to reflect on March of the Oni and just all in all talk about some of its pros and cons, what went well, what didn't go well, what are the different roles that March of the Oni plays in terms of the big picture and the series as a whole, and how did it do well in these roles, how did it not do well. So we're reflecting on March of the Oni's pros and cons today. So the first big role that Season 10 plays is, well, it's simply put, is the 10th season of the entire series. And what does this represent? Well, it's a major milestone, especially considering it is a LEGO show. And they've been doing these LEGO Ninjago sets for 10 seasons now. Now, it's also the conclusion to the Oni Trilogy, the 3-season story, and that period of darker seasons that was started in 2018 and ends with this season, really. It's a trilogy of these 3 seasons, and it's a connected story. Now, it's also the end of the Masters of Spinjitzu era. It's the last season to be produced by Film, and it's that last season with this more serious tone. Starting in mid-2019, we now have Ninjago being branded as a new TV series sometimes, and Secrets of the Forbidden Spinjitzu now has a much more childish tone directed to a younger audience. So to reflect on March of the Oni as an entire season, I want to take a look at these 3 roles and how well Season 10 performed for each of them. And again, the first role is that it is the show's 10th season. And this is a major milestone, and I feel like March of the Oni did really well in playing the show's 10th season. March of the Oni is more of a character-based season than a story-based season, and we actually get to see a lot of aspects that are very similar to back in the early days, especially with the characters too. And what I love about this season is how each of the aspects from the earlier days of Ninjago are emphasized. You have Cole and how he learned to be independent with his fall. Then you have Kai forging the weapons, that nice callback to him being a blacksmith. Lloyd once again being the green ninja and that stuff. Then you also have Jay and his relationship with Nia, that's emphasized. And of course, Garmadon and his inner struggle is once again put into the spotlight. You have Wu doing his normal master stuff, and then there's Zane, who basically does nothing this entire season. So I do feel like it did do a good job in being that milestone 10th season. This season also had a lot of references back to the earlier seasons of Ninjago, not just the character traits I talked about, but more obvious stuff too, like the golden weapons, of course, and the golden armor was important to the plot. Then you also have the Tornado of Creation, making its first appearance since Season 1. That's been a long time since it was last done. So this season did definitely cater to the fans in that sense, that it really did provide a trip down memory lane. And then there are also a lot of smaller references too, such as Kai and his hand movement to Garmadon in episode 96. They reference back to episode 10, so I feel like it did do well in that sense. Now, when we're talking about how it performed as the conclusion to the Oni Trilogy, this is the big problem with the season. The Oni Trilogy is definitely really story-focused, and it features the return of Garmadon, and also the introduction of the Oni, which are the new ultimate evil, basically, of the season, and the oldest evil in all of the realms. And that's pretty big, and this season just doesn't really focus on plot that much. Like I said earlier, it is more a character-driven season that focuses on the stories of the characters and how they evolve, rather than really just developing the story and making sure it's at its best. So we end up getting this 4-episode special that really does rush the Oni, it rushes the resolution, and it just doesn't really feel as good as it could have been. Then you have the season's main villain, the Omega, and he barely speaks, has very few lines. Also, there's no backstory, which is a big problem considering he is the leader of the most ancient evil to exist, and he should be a lot more important to the plot. But it just feels like he's kind of there to fill that role of the main villain, rather than tying into the plot that much. I mean, sure, he kind of has a story with Garmadon, but other than that, there's not really much to Omega, and so he's went down as basically the show's most underdeveloped villain. But when we're talking about the show's final role, and that is as the end of Masters of Spinjitzu, and I do think that this season did pretty well in that. This season is really heavy on themes, and it is a pretty deep season, so I do feel like it did really well in summing up that Masters of Spinjitzu era with one final performance, and a performance that was really focused on thematic writing. An unpopular opinion, but I do think March of the Oni was a really good ending to Masters of Spinjitzu because it focused a ancient evil and one that had been developed throughout the last 2 seasons. Even though the Omega is a severely underdeveloped villain, the Oni as an entire army did get necessary backstory, and I do feel like that was well done, and they introduced the Oni very well, so I think that was great. Now you also have the focus on characters, which was also a great way to end off Masters of Spinjitzu with one final look at the characters characters, and now you have season 11 where I feel like all the characters really have been dumbed down a lot, and they certainly aren't the same that they used to be. But the big thing with March of the Oni is that it is a serious season, and season 11 is by no means a serious season. This does not really focus that much on thematic writing, and it instead is meant to be a fun experience for the viewer rather than something that is deep or emotional. So that is basically season 11, and I feel like one final emotional performance to end off Masters of Spinjitzu was the right way to go. And I feel like a lot of people were really disappointed. And yeah, people are still disappointed with endings, but I feel like that sense of disappointment was even more there when season 10 had finished airing. And so it just seemed really confusing to take Garmadon out of the story like that. But now looking back on that, we know that this is the ending of Masters of Spinjitzu. Nobody really could have known that when the season had aired. And so now it makes a lot more sense why Garmadon is out of the story, and why they approached the season the way they did, with a greater emphasis over characters rather than the story. And yeah, I feel like the big problem was that they were limited by the 4 episodes. Had they had more episodes, maybe even a 10-episode season, I feel like they would have done a great job balancing both story and characters. And so this could have been one of the best seasons yet. Now, it is important to look back on March of the Oni because it really is a milestone season. And it tends to get forgotten a lot. A lot of people just don't really see it as that memorable. But I think March of the Oni definitely is underrated. It gets a lot of hate, and I feel like it doesn't get some of the credit that it deserves. It has some awesome scenes, such as the Tornado of Creation scene, even though the idea of the Oni getting defeated with that creation tornado is kind of ridiculous. The scene itself is still done wonderfully, and I feel like stuff like this is often forgotten because it was just so rushed. And so March of the Oni wasn't a terrible season for me. I can respect your opinion if you don't like it. I mean, that's totally fine. I can totally see why you didn't like the emphasis over characters rather than story, but I feel like it was for a purpose, and I just wanted to take some time to reflect on this season in today's video. Anyways, that'll sum up today's video. Thanks for watching. If you guys enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, share it with anyone ever you know, and let me know some of your thoughts on March of the Oni, any reflections you guys may have, and I will see you next time.